Excellent. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. And it's a pleasure to have you all join us for the launch of this demographic trends and urbanization report today. It's a collaborative effort. It's a large and extended team that has worked across on this report from the various regions. And the aim of this work is to zoom in on demographic trends in urban areas and cities and explore their implications for sustainable urban development. Now, demographic trends are pointing to two major global shifts. One is population growth rates are declining in almost all countries all over the world, and just about everywhere people are living longer. Now, policymakers have a variety of uses for such information. At national level, decision makers will want to be looking, not just at national, but also at local level, but they'll be wanting to look at issues related to retirement, pensions, healthcare services, etc. And, for us in working on urban development, this is particularly important to understand the challenges and the opportunities that arise from demographic trends in urban areas so that one can figure out how can cities and mayors and local governments and governors cope with issues of an aging population, of a declining urban population, what infrastructure spending should be, what types of services should be delivered to the population, and how can we design cities today to help them prepare for some of them for an accelerated population growth, and for others to deal with a process of population decline or an evolving set of population in terms of demographics. So the launch of the report is particularly timely because 2020 and 2021 brought about census data that's recently published in the US, in China, and I was reading a report on it with really fascinating emerging trends, but also in many other countries. And these have triggered the thinking about conversations related to declining birth rates and the increasing life expectancy, as well as the shrinking of the working age population in several countries. At the same time, the access to city level demographic and census data can contribute also to our understanding of other key policy making decisions. For instance, understanding about pandemic hotspots, where to focus resources, in terms of the pandemic response and targeting of a vulnerable population. So we're pleased to have with us a group of a very distinguished panel with a group of decision makers, also thought leaders in the area. We're joined by the UK National Innovation Institute for Aging, a leading organization with a mandate to develop and bring to market innovative products and services designed to make our lives better as we age. We are obviously delighted to have with us our elected local leaders from Newcastle and from Kenya. And we really have a very exciting agenda. We're starting with a brief presentation of the report by Maitreyi Das, the manager of the Global Programs Unit at the Global Practice for Global Practice for Urban Disaster Risk Management, Resilience and Land. And it will be followed by a moderated discussion where Orazio Terrasa, our lead urban specialist, will moderate it, involving Pat Ritchie, Chief Executive of Newcastle City Council, the Governor Lee Kianjui, Governor of the County Government of Nakuru, Kenya, and a partner with whom I've worked for years in Kenya. So great to have you with us, Governor. Amit Dar, the Director, Regional Director for Africa for the Human Development Practice, and last but not least, Lynn Corner, National Innovation Centre for Aging in the UK, and Patrick Hamilton, the head of the regional delegation for the United States and Canada for the International Committee of the Red Cross. So first, let me pass it over to Maitreyi for a 10 to 15 minute presentation, after which Orazio will take over the moderation and we would have this excellent conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samay, and real pleasure to be here. Great pleasure to be able to introduce this report to you. My presentation is going to be really short. I hope that you will read the report and be able to cull out for yourself this vast expanse of the relationship between demographic trends and urbanization. Urbanization in and of itself being a demographic trend. So the next slide, please. So what are these big trends that we're talking about? And when we talk about demographic trends, we really talk about the holy trinity of demography, which is fertility, mortality, and migration. Those are the three things that we talk about when we're thinking about demography in general. So short point, people are living longer. So life expectancy is much higher than it used to be. People are having fewer kids to replace the ones who die. And that is leading to changes in population growth that we will see. And regardless of a kind of sometimes a frantic focus on high fertility, in fact, fertility is declining across the board, everywhere. Some places more than others. Third, in migration, there's large-scale population movement, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, whether it is towards jobs and towards better lives, or it is because people are being pushed out because of climate change, disasters, or war. So these are the three main trends that we're seeing. But within these trends, there's great heterogeneity. They are very diverse. They're very diverse across cities. They're sometimes even diverse within cities, although we often don't have data to be able to capture that, but they are diverse across villages, across regions, countries. So this diversity is what we capture in the report. And so we have specific region-specific chapters that will give you a sense of the major cities and the ways in which demographic trends are likely to shape them. Next, please. And I'm going to go through the next three slides very quickly. The darker the blue, the greater the level of urbanization. So this is 1950. Take a look at what's happening, about 30%. Next, please. 2018, look at how dark the blue got. It's 55%. Next, please. That's 2050. So pretty much very urbanized world, other than very small places that still tend to be between 20 to 40%, but they are really, really minuscule. Next, please. So here's what's happening with population growth. And on the right, you see the legend, which signifies the regions that the World Bank works with. Or the classification that the World Bank has, which is a bit different from the classification that the UN has. But this is our classification. The trend that is in the aggregate that you're seeing is that average annual population growth is on a decline. It's steeper in some places and it's flatter in others. It is flatter where there was already very low fertility. And this gives you the expanse between 1960 and 2050. So almost 100-year period, 90-year period. So take a look at what's happening. Next, please. All right, so why do these things matter? And why are we even talking about it? They matter, in short, because they lead to profound changes in societies and in economies. So to give examples, the age structure of a population changes. You must be very familiar with seeing population pyramids. Now, population pyramids are no longer pyramids. Pyramids are a thing of the past. And why is that? That's because the base of the pyramid that's very wide signifies a high fertility regime where kids in the age group of, say, 0 to 10 comprise a large proportion of the age structure. As fertility declines, as life expectancy moves up, you could see either a jar, you could see a bulge in the middle, or you could see a top-heavy pyramid. But pyramids, as we knew them, no longer exist and will not exist. You'll see spatial shifts. You'll see spatial shifts within urban areas, from rural to urban areas. You'll see spatial shifts sometimes where entire urban areas declining. You might see spatial shifts with shrinking cities. You might see spatial shifts of different kinds, which are very specific to a particular region or a particular city. And that is something that you will find in our report as well. Living arrangements, why does this matter? Why do living arrangements matter? They matter because of the manner in which, whether it's a nuclear family or an extended family or a single person family, matters a lot for, in particular, in urban areas. And I can give you more examples about how that comes to be, but it matters, say, for aging. So who are the oldest populations living with is very important when we're making policies for them in terms of both their care, but also their productivity as they age. So in all, you'll see implications for infrastructure, for services, for employment, for fiscal stability as populations age and as pressures on pension systems become more and more more strong, among others. Next, please. So I talked about aging, and in fact, if you take a look at the UN population prospects, it talks about aging as being the mega trend. It is the two mega trends actually are aging and urbanization. So that's what the UN talks about in terms of the big headline figures. Aging is going to be a reality, not just in countries of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, not just in Latin America and the Caribbean, and not just in East Asia and the Pacific, which we know to be aging. So this is something that the literature really does point to, and it's very much there in the popular discourse, as well as the narrative, the policy narrative across these countries. But you're also going to start seeing aging in sub-Saharan Africa. It's going to be slow, but it is undoubted that there will be a larger proportion of persons above the age of 65 by 2050, even in sub-Saharan Africa, certainly in the Middle East, North Africa, as well as South Asia region. Next, please. So let me give you a couple of slides, and I realize this is a bit wordy, so don't focus on the slide. What this slide is really telling you, or what I'm trying to tell you here, is that the relationship between age structure, and so for instance, aging and urbanization, is a very deep one. Let's think about highly urbanized contexts. Highly urbanized contexts, let's see in Latin America and the Caribbean, are also those contexts that have very high shares of the elderly. So because life expectancy is higher, because fertility rates are fairly low, in most countries, you will see in ECA countries and in Latin American and Caribbean countries, you will see highly urbanized contexts, high levels of aging. Some less urbanized contexts, there are other things that may be happening. The elderly could actually be left behind in rural areas, and the younger generations could move to urban areas. This has significant implications for intergenerational transfers of resources across rural and urban locations, which tells us that we cannot think in terms of rural and urban as being watertight areas, and that there is a continuum, not just in terms of there's certainly an economic continuum across rural and urban areas, but there's also a very strong continuum through intergenerational transfers, which also translates into an economic relationship. There are least urbanized contexts, and they tend to be in some parts of Asia and in some parts of the South Asia region and many parts of the Africa region. They tend to have younger populations today. So today, what you will see in the policy discourse, as far as Africa in particular is concerned, is that there are a lot of kids. There are a lot of kids. There are a lot of people in the working age, but these are contexts that will see aging as well as urbanization occurring simultaneously. And so they will have to manage both these contexts together. And then today, that are low-income countries that have medium levels of urbanizations are seeing simultaneous youth bulges and growing numbers of the elderly. And typically, these would be countries in Middle East and North Africa. Next, please. All right, so why else does it matter? It matters because here, take a look at this. Aging has gender implications. Women tend to live longer than men do. And this is Japan in the left not pyramid is 2015 Japan. And take a look at the horizontal bar right on top. What happens to it? On the right side, you have women, and on the left side, you have men, and you will see a far higher proportion of women than men, with, again, implications for policy as well as equity. Next, please. Or take migration. Migrants of all hues, they gravitate to urban areas because life is just better in urban areas. Poverty is lower. That's where jobs are, services are. But it's also very political. And we know this from the discourse around migrants, even in the United States, but in pretty much every country, the migration discourse is highly politically charged. There are recent displacements due to conflicts. Some countries have active policies for both immigration and emigration. So they'll say, we will not allow a certain kind of group to leave, or we will not allow a certain kind of group to enter. Others are caught off guard. And in Europe, for instance, the issue of declining populations is also fraught with a discourse around migration that is highly politically charged, but very, very relevant to policy. Next, please. And so here are the policy questions. How are cities, large and small, going to rise to these challenges? What are the institutional changes that will be needed? What are the kind of data that we'll need? What will happen to regimes of shrinking populations or shrinking cities? What will happen to cities that have large youth cohorts? Everyone wants cities to do more, do more for every age group, depending on what your advocacy sort of thrust is. But will doing less be socially sustainable? And how are you going to manage the fiscal and the political issues that are related to policy choices that cities and countries will have to make? Thank you very much. Back to you, Horacio, it's over to you.
Thank you, Maitreyi. Thank you for this great presentation. And I hope that we can start getting some of the answers to those questions through the discussion that we're gonna start right now. So we have the honor to have this amazing panel today. And let me tell you that each panelist has been selected in relation to one of the main trends that we identified in the document, in the report, and that Maitreyi was talking about. So let me start by Pat Ritchie. Pat is the Chief Executive of the Newcastle City Council. And she's the first female chief executive that was chosen in 2013. Before that, she was working in the Government Homes and Community Agency, and she led programs for affordable homes programs. So it's interesting also to have that side to bring that side into the conversation of the affordable housing. So Pat, you are the chief executive of a city that has experienced two of these main trends. One is a shrinking city with a rich industrial past and with a population reached about in 1960, about 1 million, and reach a low in 2001 at about 740,000 people. Now I see that population is starting to grow again in the last years. But so, and also you have an aging population. So my question for you is, what is the policy of Newcastle? How is Newcastle responding to these two phenomena? What other regions can learn about it? So over to you, Pat.
Thank you, Horacio. It's a great pleasure to be here today to the launch of this very important report from the World Bank. As you said, I'm Chief Executive of Newcastle City Council, a government civic organisation in the UK that's responsible for delivering services. I'm the first Chief Exec, and given female Chief Exec, as you said, and given that Newcastle City Council's been going in some shape or form for about 700 years, that's probably not a bad achievement, and a long time in coming. I just wanted to talk a bit about what we've been doing in the city and the way in which we have embraced ageing as a key policy within the city and a key opportunity in terms of economic development. And so I did want to, before I talk a bit about ageing, just talk a little bit about COVID and the pandemic, because I think it's a moment with that, talking a bit about the fun, and what we've seen already in terms of trends is further highlighted the importance of the link between the economy, health and well-being. And that's really at the heart of our policy for the city. And COVID has brought that into more sharp relief, particularly in terms of inequalities, because it's certainly the case that the disease has had more of an impact in poorer areas, and it's likely to further exacerbate inequalities in our cities. And that applies also to ageing, where if you live in one part of our city, you've probably got about another 10 years of healthy living before you start to get ill compared with other parts of our city. So I think there's a big issue around ageing and inequality that is also linked to the way in which the pandemic has played out across our city that's important to highlight. We've been working for a number of years with our partners in the city to create Newcastle as a leader in ageing and longevity. And we really want to improve the quality of life and support for our people to live longer, but to live healthier, more productive lives, while sustaining the city as a great place to live and work. And our work includes not just research and care, but developing a whole new economy around the social and financial benefits that healthy ageing can bring to our city. And we work very closely with the University of Newcastle and Newcastle Hospital Trust to do that. And we're also, as you said earlier, the host of the National Innovation Centre for Ageing, which is located in the heart of the city. And really what we try to do is work together to respond to the challenges our citizens face, while seeing opportunities through the lens of economy and jobs and health and well-being. And we want to develop a vibrant, competitive, inclusive city where working for our citizens and creating opportunities for our citizens. And we see creating a city that's age-friendly as being a city that is also a good place to live, whatever your age. And that's been at the heart of a number of our city policies. So we've created something called the City Futures Board, which brings together the economy, health, and future thinking around net zero, and really brings all of the partners together to look at how we build an economic recovery post-COVID that looks at those pillars and includes also living with COVID as part of our issues. We've also developed a world-leading innovation ecosystem around the Helix Centre, where we intend to translate our strengths in ageing and other innovation sectors into enterprises, skills and investment for economic growth, with the Helix as an international hub for science and innovation at the heart of the city centre and at the heart of the city's economy. And that also plays into the collaborative Newcastle initiative that we've developed, which really, I think, talks about how you develop new services, prevention, and different ways of dealing with ageing that the report highlighted in the presentation earlier. And through Collaborative Newcastle, we've been looking at health and care partners, improving health, improving prevention, and improving people to live more independent longer. And we've also, through the Centre for Ageing and Vitality, we're starting to look at how we look at the new challenges around ageing that longevity brings, with early prevention and diagnosis of chronic diseases, including improved management of multimorbidity. But we also see that as something that will create economic spin-offs and opportunities in the kind of ageing economy of the future. So for us, a focus on demographic change and place really matters. And now more than ever, as we move into post-COVID recovery, it's important that we're prepared for future shocks in the economy and public health and climate change, and that we invest in transformational change in our economy for all of our citizens to live well and longer, to create jobs, and to be sure that we take care of both their health and wealth. I hope that gives a bit of a flavour for the kind of practical approaches in Newcastle, and I'm sure that my good friend and colleague Lynn Corner will pick up on some of those themes as we go through this discussion, Horacio.
Okay, thank you very much, Pat. Maybe we can come back later to talk about this growth of population that you're experiencing since 2001, that I'm very interested in it. So let me go to our second panelist today, which is His Excellency, the Honorable Lee Mayani Kinjayui, the Governor of the Nakuru County in Kenya. And the governor, before becoming a governor, he was assistant minister for roads, and later he was called the first chairperson of the National Transport and Safety Authority. So from what I read, Mayor, you are bringing all that experience now to big infrastructure projects. And to some extent, you are representing in this panel, a fast-growing region in a context where you still have a high level of urbanization, people moving from rural to urban, cities growing at a very fast pace. So my question for you is, what is the policy in terms of urban planning, of delivering infrastructure? What is the policy of the county? Over to you.
So thank you very much, and allow me to congratulate the World Bank for facilitating this forum, and particularly for this report, which we believe will go a long way in ensuring that planners of urban planning have data upon which they can rely on when they're making critical decisions on planning. First, also, allow me to just give a brief intro that in Kenya, we have about 47 counties, and these are sub-national governments. And out of these sub-national governments, you may have different cities, one or two, and maybe other smaller towns. And as the report has indicated, much of the country is actually made of those small little towns. But the truth is, we see a very, very, very heavy flow of people from rural areas to those urban centers. And therefore, in conformity with what the report also found out, is the fact that a lot of these people are young people, often looking for opportunities and jobs. And because there's a lingering attitude that opportunities and jobs and businesses are found in urban areas, I think those who remain appear not to be doing well. And for that reason, for most of the kids in school and all that, the thing is to finish school in the rural areas and go to the big cities. So as a result of that, we have seen a massive growth in urbanization. Now, the problem is that sometimes this growth is not informed by fundamentals, like the demand. They are not responding to demand. Sometimes also it's just about perception. And that has seen the growth of informal settlements, and this would also be cited as one of the biggest challenges we have in our cities and urban centers, and one that would require to be dealt with in good time. The other thing that we also see is the issue of planning. As has been stated, most of our although the urban movement is very high, but in terms of population percentage, it still remains one of the lowest regions. And therefore, what we see in the days to come is that the cities of tomorrow will largely be found in the places where urbanization has not grown. So that also portends to a higher growth possibility within this region. And therefore, the need for planning. And in the planning, I think some of the issues we've mentioned here will also be very critical. Because in most of our urban centers, if you look at the transport infrastructure, if you look at the living and the housing and how we've done all that, is mainly inclined to serve what you may call the middle to younger sort of ages. If you find a very old person living in our urban centers, the transport system is not very well defined to fit into them. For example, if you're living, say, in Nairobi and you're using public transport and you're in a wheelchair, the conformity of the public transport system to accommodate your wheelchair becomes a big challenge. And this is a story across many other places. And therefore, you tend to find that a lot of the people in the urban places tend to be younger because the infrastructure is also a bit limiting and sometimes intimidating to older persons. And I think these are areas that are very important, making sure that urban planners incorporate walkways, incorporate the public transport system, lifts, and all these other infrastructure necessary as we move forward. Yes, it is true that most of the people are young or able, but as they age, they go back to the rural areas. And I think also it's good to know that there is a cultural thing that when people get to a certain age, they want to go back. And I think those are issues that are important also to our planners as we move forward. Critical also as we move forward is the need to look for forward planning. A lot of the small cities and mini cities and towns that you see have come out of convenience, not out of deliberate planning. And as a result of that, we may need now later on to come and replan. And therefore, having noted that, and also in view of some of the findings that we come across here, there is need to add capacity in urban planning to ensure that urban centers are purposefully made. And for that reason, they are well planned, there's provision for services, and this can be done from the onset as opposed to coming and imposing planning when already people have settled. And this can be very disruptive and oftentimes leads to a lot of riots and disturbance for the public. So as we move forward, I think the big issue here is how we can be able to give capacity to our urban centers, to our municipalities and all these areas so that planning can be done looking into 30, 40 years from now, as opposed to changing as and when we are forced to do some of those things. Key challenges that obviously will come in are issues related to solid waste management that continues to be a big issue in the cities. So as African cities and urban centers, including Nakuru here, continue to grow, the issue of solid management will continue to be a big issue. And also not forgetting the climate change effects that can be already, that are already being felt in a lot of our urban areas. Allow me also to mention just two more issues. Is on the issue of the brain drain, that a lot of the rural areas, the young children and the graduates who do well tend to go to urban areas. And as a result of that, we see a lot of brain drain from rural areas to urban centers. And this has a huge impact, especially in agriculture, noting that much of the rural areas is where you want to do this agriculture. And so when you have the best brains now living in the rural areas coming to urban areas, then you also are going to have a big challenge in the days to come. And therefore, the key to some of these issues is also to avail within the not so big cities, avail all the services necessary so that you don't end up also distorting the social settlement patterns and also affecting agriculture. And also closely related to that is the need for us to invest in vertical structures. So again, you will find that a lot of land near our urban areas where we previously grew maize or wheat is quickly being subdivided very fast because of the huge urban growth. And as a result of this, we are fast losing our capability in food security. And therefore, the big question will be the urban areas of tomorrow, where will the food come from if we do not deliberately plan on how we can be able to change the housing patterns, allow people to go vertical and leave the land available for agriculture. And these are some of the key areas that we think will be very critical as we move forward with respect to urban growth. Then lastly is also to mention that there has been significant improvement in healthcare. And with the improvements in healthcare, we expect life expectancy to go much higher than it probably has been in the past. And I think all this will mean that populations will continue soaring in urban areas. And therefore, all public facilities from transport to water, to sewer, to public areas must also grow in a commensurate manner. And I think these areas will all be important as we move forward. And for Nakuru, I think is also important for us to note that we are one of the fastest growing towns actually in Kenya, soon to be a city. And sometimes the mention of growth also attracts more. When you say you are fast growing, then people assume you're growing for a reason. Therefore, more and more people want to come. And because there exists no policy where you can say now we are enough, if a city or an urban area can hold 500,000 people and more come, you cannot stop them from coming other than using economic instruments such as cost of living and so on. And therefore, these become very critical issues for urban planning. But I want to say that we are very pleased with the report, and we will go through it so that we can be able to benefit from all of it. Thank you. And once again, much delighted to be here.
Okay, thank you, Governor. Thank you very much. So let me go to our third panelist today, which is Patrick Hamilton. Patrick is the head of the regional delegation for the United States and Canada from the International Committee of the Red Cross. Patrick, to some extent, is representing the migration trend here. He has a very rich experience. He has been the Deputy Regional Director for the Near and Middle East region, covering Iraq, Iran, and Syria. He was also the head of the delegation for Somalia, and he has also been working in Afghanistan, in Kandahar. So, Patrick, my question for you is, we know that, I mean, ICRC is active in more than 100 countries and responding to armed conflicts and other situations of violence. So how is the impact that these conflicts and violence have on cities, on urban built environment? And also, maybe you can reflect about the impact of the refugees and IDPs on urban landscape and systems in general. Patrick, are you there? So I saw Patrick connected before. Oh, his audio is being blocked. Salam, is it been blocked by us?
He's fine. He has access to it.
Okay.
Let me open for everyone. Patrick, can you try again?
Can you hear me now?
Patrick? Yeah, you can hear me. Yeah.
Okay, great. And if you're able to unblock the video, you'll be able to see me as well. Sorry for this.
Okay. Salam, is that unblocked?
It is, but you're not seeing through the right camera.
Okay.
Sorry for this. Look, I'll start without the video.
Yeah, let's start and see if we can fix it.
Sure. Okay. Well, look, I'll start without the video. Thanks so much, Horatio, for the opportunity to speak today. It's great to be with you, and the congratulations to you also for the great report that you've released, which obviously highlights an awful lot of very important trends globally on this very important topic. And it's obviously a great honor to be with you with this very esteemed group of panelists. As you rightly say, the ICRC obviously has this mandate to protect and assist victims of armed conflict and armed violence around the world. And what we've been seeing over the last 20 years is in particular a trend of conflict in urban areas, which has obviously been challenging us as an institution to come up with responses to the scale and complexity of the needs that we've been seeing. And clearly, as we see exemplified by the conflict over the last couple of, the last week or so in Gaza, the impact of conflict in urban areas is absolutely tremendous, with civilians being killed and wounded, displaced in huge numbers, and in ways that are obviously particularly difficult to recover from. So just on the broader environment to this, we at the ICRC see a number of trends that are sort of backgrounds to this. First of all, clear concentration of conflict today, in particular in Africa and the Middle East. We spend some 70% of our annual budget in those two regions alone, obviously with these particular demographic bubbles that were alluded to in the first presentation. Clearly also affected very much by that trend of rural-urban migration, which is being exacerbated by climate change, which is particularly acute in those regions. And that also combined with the protracted nature of conflict in the main context where we work, and where we have been present in the majority of the contexts where we are primarily operational on average for the last 35 years. And so here we're really talking about Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Israel and the Palestinian territories, Afghanistan, Somalia, Lake Chad, and the Sahel region, and so on. And so you really have a kind of an accumulation of major trends and drivers and problems layered on top of one another that are clearly exacerbating all of these issues, driving people out of rural areas towards urban areas, creating disenfranchisement, and that then create unrest and further fault lines between communities, and that then drive on these conflicts and make them all the more difficult to resolve as well. And so against this background, we've obviously been seeing a clear rise in conflict in urban areas over the last 20 years. And what we see in terms of the main challenges in these urban areas is, first and foremost, the scale of the needs in urban areas is significantly more acute than it is in rural areas, simply by the nature of urban areas being so densely populated. By the complexity of the needs we have in urban areas due to the diversity of the population, young, old, as well as then the demographic, political complexities of different communities living in these cities. And then by the population movements that we see obviously in conflicts in cities, both within cities and then out of cities when fighting is going on. And then the interconnectedness of urban infrastructure upon which these populations rely, and the fact that clearly health services are dependent on electricity as well as water infrastructure, and so damage to one piece of that infrastructure has a major domino effect on the functioning of the rest of that infrastructure, and therefore can have major implications for hundreds of thousands of people. And thirdly, then the fact that there are political challenges of inclusion and exclusion in urban areas, both during and in the aftermath of major battles as well, that clearly render dealing with and providing services to those populations a very complex political issue as well. So clearly, as far as we're concerned, such situations call for a holistic analysis, but combining prevention measures and responses. And for us at the ICRC, the humanitarian response in urban areas really needs to strike the right balance between emergency support, resilience building, between short and long-term needs. And we really need to think about large-scale integrated approaches that factor in demographic fault lines and contribute to addressing needs inclusively and in ways that contribute to community resilience and reconciliation over the longer term, which is where we clearly see a need for humanitarian and development actors to work together to leverage the complementarity of our specific expertise and resources.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Patrick. And let me move on to our fourth panelist today, which is Lynn Corner. Lynn is the director of the National Innovation Centre for Aging in the UK. And the center has been promoting innovation in the public and private sector, both to prepare societies for this longevity economy. So can you, Lynn, tell us more about what the center is doing and how our society is being prepared for this?
Thanks, Horacio. So first of all, Nick is just delighted to be working with the World Bank on this important part on demographic trends and urbanization, and really be part of this global conversation on how to respond to the demographic trends in urban environments, because part of the work of the National Innovation Centre for Aging is to really bring intelligence from evidence and from citizens, and work with policymakers and with businesses to make sure that the products and services are available for people to live well and make the most of the opportunity for life expectancy right across the globe. And it is truly an international agenda, as this report shows. I think what is really important, and what the report really highlights, and as Pat and others have highlighted, is the need to focus increasingly not just on life expectancy, as important as that is, but a healthy life expectancy, and make sure that we're planning for kind of the quality through life, not just the quantity of life, if you like, for current and future urban populations. The inequalities that COVID has really starkly highlighted need to be addressed if we are to make the most of healthier, longer lives. And I think a really important part of the National Innovation Centre's work is to focus on the importance of human capital. It's so important that we focus on this demographic dividend in terms of harnessing the potential for longevity economies and investing through life in human capital, certainly in education skills in early life, but also in mid to later life, to enable people to work longer and continue to be as productive as possible into later life. Another part of the National Innovation Centre's work in the UK and elsewhere is to really stress that the longevity economies and the benefits that come from kind of, demographic change really is a significant emerging market opportunity for economies globally, for businesses, consumers, and it creates massive opportunities for different working patterns, for new markets, for products and services that meet the aspirations and the needs of current older populations, but also future populations as well. So there is a major economic opportunity. And I think, as others have stressed as well, one of the work, the focus that we have as well is making sure that there is this life course approach to planning and to urban infrastructure to support healthy aging, and to ensure that it's cross-generational, so that the design of urban environments for four-generation housing, for public buildings that really enable, not disable. And so understanding the role of urban environments and infrastructure is just so important, and to make that connection between the megatrends of sustainability and healthy life expectancy, so that we have got policies which put both citizen and planet at the heart of urban regeneration and planning. So, we're delighted to be part of the report. A big thank you to my colleague Anya McCarthy, who really led on this for us. But we see this as a chance to reimagine the opportunities around demographic change, and to put the citizens at the centre, to put human capital and the importance of inclusive policies which support the social and economic contributions of individuals right across the life course.
Great, thank you, Lynn. And talking about putting the citizens at the center, let me go to our final panelist today, which is Amit Dar. Amit is the Regional Director for Human Development in the Human Development Practice in Africa. And he was previously also the Director of Strategy and Operations of Human Development for the World Bank. Amit has worked in many different sectors within the World Bank, in education, labor markets, social protection. And we are very interested in getting his view on human development from the World Bank point of view of these new demographic trends. Amit, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Horatio, and thanks to you and Maitri for putting together a very, very important and interesting report, and then sort of, I think raising some very critical policy questions and addressing them in the report. So I think it gives us a lot of food for thought moving forward. And from sort of parochially from the human development perspective, it really gives us a lot of information and a lot of thinking on ways to move forward. So thanks a lot for that. Just to say a few things, I think it is really great to see that life expectancy has increased significantly around the globe. I think in 2019 it was around 72 years, and one of the challenges we see with that is that it is fairly uneven. So there is about 21 countries where it's below 60 and or lower, and about 34 countries where it's over 80. So so there is a lot of disparity in that, but a major achievement is that no country right now has a life expectancy of below 50 years. So that's, I think, definitely a significant progress over the last few decades. I think one thing we'd like to note is that in Sub-Saharan Africa, which is where I work, life expectancy has actually increased by about 12 years in the last 3 decades, while the population has gone up very significantly from about 500 million to about 1.1 billion. And in Sub-Saharan Africa, the increase has been, the 12 years that we're talking about, has been the largest globally. So there are sort of positive trends in this, and the report is also talking about quite a few of these things. How do we sustain these trends in the future is going to be an important issue and question, and one of the things is that sort of life expectancy at birth basically means sort of improving the survival rates of children, and we see that those have gone up quite significantly over the last few decades. But adult survival has not increased to the same extent as that for children. So, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, adult mortality has only declined by about 25%. Since 1990. So that's something that we are, I think, looking at and trying to see how we can better address it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the trends in some of the other regions are also fairly similar, though obviously we see more significant improvements in sort of Europe and North America. And so I think priorities for increasing life expectancy are spread across many areas and sectors, and I think longevity is driven by improvements in nutrition, in investments in clean water, improvements in sanitation, public health measures, mass vaccination. So there are quite a lot of factors, and I just named a few which would be leading to decreased mortality rates. And obviously these have to be accompanied by increased incomes, education, urbanization, and the report does a wonderful job of looking at these issues. And for us in human development, I think continuing to focus on priorities, interventions in health, including vaccinations, reproductive health, communicably, and increasingly on the NCD, non-communicable disease agenda, education, especially that of women. I think that's going to be a very, very big factor. Social protection systems that support the poorest and cushion the wider populations in terms of crisis. These are some of the things which we think will drive these numbers further up. And I think one of the big challenges that we see is that sort of, climate change and control of epidemics is also going to play a very big role. And we've seen that obviously with COVID-19, but also over the last few years with the Ebola crisis that happened in some countries in Africa. And we know that climate change does affect social and environmental determinants of health, clean air, drinking water, sufficient food and shelter. And climate change is expected, according to WHO numbers, is expected to cause about 250,000 additional deaths per year in the next 2 decades, from roughly 2030, next 3 decades, from about 2020 to 2050. And changes in temperature and rainfall will influence patterns for many of these diseases that we were talking about, including waterborne disease, diarrhea, vector-borne infections like malaria, and similar disease. And climate changes will also affect the pattern of food production, which will have an impact on health impacts in terms of increased malnutrition. So I think one of the, and obviously sort of unmitigated greenhouse gas emission is definitely also going to increase the disease burden. So I think increasingly in the human development sectors, we are focusing on the link between climate change and health-related issues. I think this is something that over the last 2 or 3 years has now become much more prominent as part of the agenda as we work with governments to strengthen and develop their health systems further. That this part of the agenda plays also a prominent role. And then on pandemics, I think the one thing to say is that we need to help countries prepare for future pandemics, and having the right policies in place, investing in systems that can react in detecting threats, taking containment measures, and spread of these pandemics is also something that, as we all know, that we are working on quite a bit. Just final couple of points. I think, in the human development global practice, the World World Bank, I think we are talking a lot about the whole issue of demographic change. And of course, as people will know, within the bank will know, in HNP, Health, Nutrition and Population, the P actually stands for population. We obviously often focus on health, but population is also a big aspect of what we are doing. And it depends on region to region as to what the work is on. There are regions where obviously we have shrinking populations, and so the type of work we are doing there is often on the aging side of the equation. But in more younger areas or more younger regions like sub-Saharan Africa, the demographic work is focusing on the whole issue of demographic dividends, because a number of countries in the Africa region still have very high fertility rates. And Maitri did say that they're going down across the world, which is really a great thing to see. But we do still have quite a few countries in the Africa region where they're unsustainably high. Just to say, like Niger and Somalia, they are about 7. So that's while I think around the world the average is 2.1. So that those are things that we are working on quite a lot. And so as life expectancy is moving upwards, fertility rates are still high, leading to high rates of population growth. And this is something that a lot of our work is also focusing on. We have a lot of interesting studies going on NCDs in Rwanda, Kenya, demographic dividend pieces in Nigeria, Mozambique, Tanzania, etc., which obviously we'd be very happy to share with colleagues. And I think we also need to do much more work on life expectancies in the region as a whole, and how this is changing the age structures, and we need to really pull up and gather a lot of data for this work and sort of push forward on doing more on this. And we look forward to collaborating with you as we take this very important agenda forward. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, and sorry for taking a bit longer than I'm supposed to. But
no, it was great. Thank you, Amit. And yes, we look forward to also to keep working with you and to start working more on this and on the urban impacts that these trends are having. Absolutely. And I think that this was the idea of this report. This was just the first step, was the trigger for a deeper and broader work at regional level and subnational level. Yeah, thank you very much. So we have only 1 more minute and before closing. So I'm going to ask just one question that I'm very curious. I don't know if Pat or Lynn can answer, but I'm very curious, and you have to give me the answer just in 30 seconds. What has been going on since 2001 that population has been growing in Newcastle, a shrinking city that is growing back again? Is this incentives? The fertility rates are going up? What is the main reason behind it? 30 seconds. I don't know if Lynn or Pat, you want to take the lead.
I think I can. Yeah.
Go on, Pat.
Well, I can have a go. Proactively, we've looked to develop the city and bring more people into the city, and we've tried to do it in a way that attracts people back to the city, older people. Actually, there's a bit of a trend in the UK for people to retire to the country, and we've tried to buck that trend and actually create a sort of city where it's very livable for people as they get older, easy to move around, lots of facilities on your doorstep, more attractive than possibly living out in a village where there are less facilities. And that's been a conscious plan to attract not just older, but a range of people back to the city with a different range of housing offer, with a sort of connected transport offer, and a good quality of life.
And to design for a city of longevity, so that people can have the opportunity to live healthier, better, longer lives.
Interesting. So this is kind of a new type, to some extent, a new type of migration that we are seeing, right? Very interesting. And just, Governor Lee, just one question, 30 seconds. Again, if you could prioritize investment in infrastructure today in your county, what would be number 1? What infrastructure is number 1 for you today?
Thank you. I think the key area we would be looking at is capacity building in planning, so that all our planning is aligned. And if you spend more of your resources in planning, then you are going to benefit for a much longer period. The other area we would want to do is to align the infrastructure with an aging population also, so that older people who find themselves in cities do not feel completely unattended because of hostile infrastructure. So this alignment of public utilities, be it housing, government offices, trains and buses and taxis and all that, to accommodate the much older persons will be the next big conversation and planning. I think those are the two areas I would isolate.
Excellent. Thank you, Governor, again. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to pass it over to Same to close the meeting today. Same?
Thank you very much, Horacio, and thanks very much to our panelists, to Governor Lee, to Pat, to Lynn, to Patrick, to Amit, and thanks earlier to Maitreyi for her presentation. It really, was a very rich discussion, and we look forward to continuing to work on these issues to help inform a broader range of policy making pertaining to urban areas and the demographic trends that are affecting them, and to very much continuing the discussion with you and our cross-practice collaboration together with the health, nutrition, and population global practice, but also with the various cities and centers of expertise. So thanks a lot for taking the time, and we look forward to continuing to discuss with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.